Today we will be going back to the long discourses, the Digha Nikaya, and explore number 2 of those suttas. There's a total of 34 suttas, and they're very long, as we've had the opportunity to explore some of them, such as the Payasi Sutta. We did the Mahaparinibbana Sutta. We did the Puttapada, Mahanidana, and we also did, of course, the Brahmajala Sutta, the beginning part of this year, in January. So today we will do number 2. That was Brahmajala was number 1. This is number 2, a massively important sutta because it touches on the actual benefits of practicing the holy life, the spiritual life. In this case, it is termed as Sāmaññaphala, the fruits of reclusehood. Life, truly living the life of a recluse. Now, remember, recluse here does not necessarily just mean, as far as we're concerned, now here in this setting, in this context, not just what it relates to living the life of a bhikkhu or a monastic, not just that, but the spiritual path as such. Here we will see the curiosity, the desire to know and understand, is there such a thing as truly, visibly, here and now type of a result, an outcome to the practice? A very pragmatic, not for the purpose of being cynical or argumentative in a sense, no, but just purely to know, because everybody keeps talking about have faith, have belief, have, in something, in basically what we term as spiritual path, or in Buddhism we call it the brahmacharya, the holy life. Is there such a thing, or are there outcomes, proper results that one can anticipate from dedicating yourself to this practice? So this takes us outside of this very limited scope of view, which deals with getting some rest and relaxation, R&R, from the practice of meditation. So it's not just that, where you tackle some, stressful situations better. Yes, those are side effects. But it goes much deeper than that. There is a transformation taking place in the mind, in the very behavior of the individual truly practicing it. It has to have it in order for it to be called a spiritual path. And there is no delay. Sanditiko is the exact opposite of delaying, postponing, the waiting for the results to come. No, there has to be immediately evident factors that keep you going. So that is how I would encourage us to approach the theme of being a recluse, because you are being a recluse away from, you're turning away, you're secluding yourself away from your past ways of doing things, your hang-ups, you're gripping onto things, tendencies, habitual patterns, drives, where you think of yourself being no different than that, just part and parcel of your hidden tendencies, your fears, your anxieties. No, you're taking your seclusion away from that. You're becoming a recluse away from those tendencies. When the urge comes up, you're saying, I'm going to try this because I know where that road leads. More suffering, more stress, more pain, more sorrow. So here in this sutta, we will see someone who is in extreme pain coming to the Buddha eventually, and to ask his questions. And the person referred to here is none other than the person that you've heard us talk about so many times, mentioning usually in reference to the Devaddata, that evil bhikkhu who tried to kill the Buddha several times. The Buddha's own student who wanted to kill him, get rid of him in the first place, but he wasn't successful. So the means with which, or by which, he wanted to accomplish those nefarious goals was the individual we will see in the sutta, and that is King Ajātasattu. So you've heard me mention King Ajātasattu's name many times. He is the king who came to power by, well, actually, he didn't come to power, but he was even given the throne by his own father, King Bimbisara, who was a noble disciple, by the way. He was a Sotapanna. He didn't have any desire to hold on to things. He had seen the Dhamma. So King Ajātasattu was not satisfied with that, and he even, based on the triggering and inciting instigation that he received from Devaddata, he even committed patricide, killing his own father. So that's the person that we're going to see in the sutta. He's the main person who will come to find peace, because he's in pain, obviously, for the guilt that he had to bear. But before that, I think it will be beneficial for you listeners to know a little bit about him, because we don't usually, other than him being a father, his own, he committed patricide, he committed a murder of his own parent. And some say even his own mother. So it's good to know a little bit about him. First of all, the sutta will be Digha Nikaya number 2, as I said. Digha means long, and it's the Sāmaññaphala Sutta. I translate it as fruits gained by truly living the life of a recluse. Fruits gained by truly living the life of a recluse. Fruits here you can understand as an outcome, measure, results, consequences, results again. So who was Ajātasattu? First, just a background of his name. Let's start with that, because before he was born, while his mother was pregnant, the palace astrologers, etc., who would do such type of activity, coming to the court and saying, "My lord," to the king, who was Bimbisara, as I mentioned. He was already a student of Lord Buddha, and telling him that he will have a son, but unfortunately his son will be not a good fruit, in the sense that he will be, or he is not yet born. And that's what Ajata means, not yet born. Sattu means murderer. So this must have really made the king very uneasy, as you can imagine, which drove him to do the utmost to not lose his son, to do everything in his power to change his heart, the son's heart, once he was born. So when he was born, the father was extra attentive to Ajātasattu. And his mother was Queen Kosala Devi, and who was, in fact, the sister of King Pasenadi, the king of Kosala. So they used to, have these intermarriages, in a sense, between these powerful entities, kingdoms. So King Bimbisara was the brother-in-law of King Pasenadi that you come across many times in the suttas. But so the queen Kosala Devi and Pasenadi, King Pasenadi, were brother and sister, but their father's name was Mahakosala. He was the king prior to Pasenadi taking the throne, being given the throne. So he had given his mom as a dowry a major town of in Kasi, which is modern day Varanasi or Benares, which was already a huge major region. So there was a city within that was the most affluent city within Varanasi. Mahanamula, I think that was the name of it, the village or the city, which was very affluent. So he had given the father, King Pasenadi's father, given it to his daughter as a gift, as a dowry to his daughter, Queen Kosala Devi, who was now Bimbisara's wife. So bear that in mind as a lucrative. So even, that means whatever income that was generated, taxes, this and that, would go to the queen and her offspring, the king as well, King Bimbisara. So now when Devadatta was having his thoughts of domination, of taking over the Sangha, this is the bad, evil Bhikkhu I was mentioning, which many of you know already. But he figured out that the best way for him to do that, to topple the Buddha, was to influence a powerful figure. Now, when he looked around, he saw this young prince, Ajātasattu, whom he influenced by showing his psychic abilities, because he had attained to the 4th jhana, but nothing more or higher, Devaddata. And if one chooses, one can practice the concentration to such a point after attaining to the 4th jhana, and they can decide. This takes a lot of concentration, focus. And they can do things such as, walking on water, disappearing in one place and appearing in another. The Buddha, there's no secret in this. The Buddha mentions this throughout the suttas, countless times. So this is not magic. Everyone pretty much has the potential to cultivate those, develop those, but it requires a lot of concentration, but you have to start with Sila, purity. So Devadatta was using up his powers suddenly because he was veering away from the Dhamma. And it's only a matter of time before he lost it. But before he lost it, while he was engaged in trying to impress the prince at the time, he appeared in his chambers in the form of a child, Devadatta. Meanwhile, he's a bhikkhu. We're not allowed to do such things. It's first of all, it's deception. You're lying. You're lying. He was pretending to be somebody he was not, with snakes and cobras around his neck and this and that. So the prince was terrified. Remember, there's a goal. So Devadatta then reappears in his normal form as a bhikkhu, and he says, I am so-and-so, and I am here because I have seen your future, type of a thing, and you are going to become the king. You have to take charge. You have to take the throne from your father so that you can help me remove and topple the Buddha, so I can be the new Buddha, the head of the Sangha. Okay, I don't want to get into the background story of Devadatta because he was the brother of Queen Maya, the Buddha's Siddhartha's wife, before he left. So there was a lot of issues there. So there was a lot of animosity, but especially jealousy in Devadatta to begin with. So that was the influential part of clouding extra, because remember, Ajātasattu, when he came to this world as the son of King Bimbisara, he already had his karmic seeds pretty, laid there. It's like the sankharas were strong, but his drive, his animosity towards his father was there. Sometimes people are born into families because of the karmic knots that propel them to come into this life to, well, you can think of it as to take it to the next level, to overcome those hurdles, to pass beyond those, to grow out of them. In this case, he didn't. Because, as I mentioned about King Bimbisara, at one point, while Prince Ajātasattu was still young, a young boy, he had an infection on his finger. And it developed into a pus, and the physicians at court, they were afraid that they might have to amputate the finger, and they didn't like that. That's very bad for them to spill the blood of the prince, So the king Bimbisara, brings him onto his lap, and he says, while he's conducting the court businesses, right? He plays with his son, and he says, why don't you go ahead and put your finger in my mouth? So he puts Ajātasattu's infected finger in his mouth and he's smiling, he's laughing, while he's conducting his court business. And he's playing with his son, and as the child keeps the finger in there, and he's in pain, basically, he's in pain, Ajātasattu. He's now smiling, he's relaxed from the infection. And then the pus, the infection, bursts in the mouth of King Bimbisara, his father. While he's conducting, while they're, he's nodding this and that, but he doesn't want to spit out, obviously, the infected pus out of his mouth. He looks at his son and he decides to swallow that infected material, the pus, and he swallows it. And I don't know how many fathers who could do that, or parents or mothers who could do that. But he did. Just these are, snippets of data that are very helpful in allowing us to get a better picture of who Bimbisara was. Of course, there's many, many examples in the suttas, but I just wanted to share that. And then how Ajātasattu, Prince Ajātasattu, when he is being very passive-aggressive and angry with his father, the king says, why don't you just take the throne? So he gives him the throne. He says, I don't need it. Anyhow, you're the crown prince. I was going to give it to you. Go ahead and take it. So he gives it to him, but Devaddata is not happy with that. He incites him. He instigates him further and says, no, you can't have that, because his own people will bring him back into power and they're going to get rid of you. So best thing to do is just to have him disappear. Ajātasattu is not able to kill him directly, like with or even condemn him to death, like execution style, but he says, I will starve him to death. And that's what he does. He starves his own father to death, King Bimbisara. And the people are very upset. King Pasenadi, his own uncle, in another kingdom, the nearby kingdom, is terribly upset. And eventually he gets into a battle, because he comes in and he says, well, by the way, his own mother, the queen, Bimbisara's wife, from her sadness, shortly after she dies too, because of the unfairness of the treatment of her own love, of her own husband. And the father of her own son was killed by her own son. So that's terrible for anyone to try to bear. So she can't handle that pain. So she dies. So now, who happened to be the sister of King Pasenadi. So King Pasenadi says, this is so unfair, wrong. And on top of that, he's taking now, because the king kept on taking all that wealth coming in from that Nahanamula village, I said. So he goes into battle with King Ajātasattu, and we have that recorded in the Samyutta Nikaya in two places. One time King Ajātasattu wins the battle, and the second time he loses, and King Pasenadi takes him. He doesn't kill him. He says, he spares his life. But not long after, King Ajātasattu is killed at the hands of his own son. So kills him. I think his son's name was Udayibhadda. But that carries over for a few generations, where two other kings, his own offspring, that king Udayibhadda, his own son kills him, and then the son of that, his own grandson, basically kills his own father, Uday's son. So the people in Bimbisara's kingdom get fed up, and they kick them out, and the kings, and they install a viceroy as their ruler, because they think this is so atrocious, immoral, where it's just a habit for these people to keep killing their own father. This is wrong. This was setting the wrong example. Anyhow, so this is obviously happening before that, because here we will see King Ajātasattu approaching the Buddha after much hesitation, because he knew that he was supporting Devaddata. Devadatta's influence on him led him to do all those things, and he knew how much his own father loved the Buddha, the Bimbisara. He kept on talking about the Buddha, teaching him the Dhamma, hoping that he will get somewhere with it. So he was completely in remorse, in pain, in a state of guilt when we are seeing this sutta unfold. So I just wanted to give you a background because we don't hear much about other than the fact that he killed his own father. Well, what happened other than that? Well, I hope you now have a better, clearer image of him. And let's begin. So Digha Nikaya number 2, because it's a long sutta, not as long as the Mahabharinibbana or the Brahmajala. Still, let's see how far we can cover today. Sāmaññaphala Sutta, fruits gained by truly living the life of a recluse. This is from the first section, which is Rajamachakatha, the king's discussion with his ministers. So this is taking place at the court. This is what I personally heard. Once the Blessed One was staying at Jivaka Komarabhacha's mango grove, near Rajaka, along with a large group of the Sangha, numbering more than 1,250 bhikkhus, all arahant, by the way. Now, this took place on the 15th day Uposatha, during the full moon night of the 4th month of Komudi, when King Ajātasattu of Magadha, the son of Queen Videha, was sitting at his throne while being surrounded by his royal ministers on the upper terrace of his palace. It was then that King Ajātasattu, who was in an elated and happy mood, exclaimed with delight, "Ah, my dear sirs, how incredibly astounding this moonlit night is! Indeed, how exquisitely delightful is the moon tonight, so lovely in its tranquility and utterly ravishing in its striking glow this moonlit night. Which makes us beg the question as to who might truly be that excellent master Brahmin, that best and genuine specimen of a religious recluse, by going to whom and paying homage at his feet, it would perfectly complement this already glorious moonlit night, thereby making it truly complete by giving my heart the genuine peace for which it is so desperately in need." So and everybody knows around him what's ailing the king. So he's saying, could there be someone that it could top it, this whole experience that I'm having this beautiful night. I'm surrounded by people who, pretty much worship me as their king and ruler. I just want to go somewhere where I can, someone who can actually comfort me, comfort my heart, a teacher. So yeah, let's continue. Then, on hearing these words from King Ajātasattu, the ruler of Magadha, one of the ministers present quickly came forward by making the following suggestion. Your Royal Majesty, there is Purana Kassapa, who is the highly respected religious leader of a community that follows him unquestioningly as being the head of their order, their teacher whom they worship and venerate, as he guides and instructs them all in the community. He is truly well known and famous, and an illustrious, genuine spiritual leader whom many of his people consider saintly and holy. Being already very advanced in years, long have been the years since he has gone forth. Many say he is nearing the end of his days, seeing that he is at the last phase of his life. So he's pretty old, Purana Kassapa. Therefore, it would be wonderful if His Royal Majesty could go to visit him. For certainly in seeing him and paying homage at his feet, the heart would finally experience the genuine peace for which it is so desperately in need. However, on hearing this statement, King Ajātasattu did not say a word, but remained quiet. Before I go to the next one, just to let you know that he had already gone to that person, as well as the other teachers that are going to be suggested to him by the different ministers who follow different teachers, obviously, from what we will see. And Lord Buddha is going to ask him that question, because the king is going to bring up the fact that he has gone to all these teachers, leaving the Buddha at the end. He knows he's guilty, and he's just leaving the Buddha out of his visits. And the Buddha is going to, at the end, when he goes there, King Ajātasattu, when the Buddha asks him, well, what did Purana Kassapa, for example, say when you went to visit him? And we will see why he was disappointed enough so that he did not even say a word unto this minister who suggested Purana Kassapa. So when the king does not respond in this case, it doesn't mean that he's approving of it, but in fact, it's the opposite. He's not impressed. So basically, don't mention that guy's name type of a thing. Then another one of the ministers present addressed King Ajātasattu, the ruler of Magadha, by offering his own suggestion. Your Royal Majesty, there is Makkali Gosala, who is the highly respected religious leader of a community that follows him unquestioningly as the head of their order, their teacher whom they worship and venerate as he guides and instructs them all in the community. He is truly well known and famous, an illustrious, genuine spiritual leader whom many of his people consider saintly and holy. Being already very advanced in years, long have been the years since he has gone forth. So he had been a monk or a recluse for many, many years. Many say he is nearing the end of his days, seeing that he is at the last phase of life. Hence, it would truly be wonderful if His Royal Majesty could go to visit him. For certainly in seeing him and paying homage at his feet, the heart would finally experience the genuine peace for which it is so desperately in need. But on hearing this statement, King Ajātasattu again did not say a word and remained quiet. In India, as I discovered also in modern times, people had the tendency of paying credence or believing that somebody is really worthy of veneration and respect given how many gray hairs they have on their head, or how many years basically they have been Bhikkhu, or have gone into becoming a recluse, have gone forth, Pabbaja. Because for some reason, I think this goes back in our ancient history as human beings, we consider that because of how long a person has gone forth, that means they are the genuine article. They are real. They're the real deal, as they say. They are to be respected. For this reason, you see in many suttas, Lord Buddha is approached by some Brahmin or other, some recluse or another, or a king, in a very suspicious manner, where they come in very, highbrowed and very, very suspicious in their attitude towards the Buddha, saying that, I'm here, but you really are not somebody I should be respecting, because you are not an old bhikkhu, or you have not gone forth for many years. This is ignorance, because the gray hairs mean nothing. How many years a person has gone forth really means nothing. Examples are so many in the suttas. Just in the Book of the Threes, in the Anguttara Nikaya, Book of the Twos, Lord Buddha makes a distinction between somebody who really needs to be venerated and somebody who's not. Somebody who's really called an elder or a tero or tera versus somebody who's not, despite the fact of them having been in robes for decades. Probably the younger one was not even born yet. It means nothing, the Buddha says. That is not what makes a tero, an elder. But here, we're not even talking about bhikkhus. This is a very ingrained delusion that people have. So that's why many people shunned the Buddha for many years, missed out on the instructions that they would have or could have received from him, because they thought, well, he's just a new bhikkhu. A terrible mistake on their part, which unfortunately still continues within, well, even in our tradition. Anyhow, then yet another one of the royal ministers addressed King Ajātasattu, the ruler of Magadha, by offering his own suggestion. Your Royal Majesty, there is Ajita Kesa Kambali, who is a highly respected religious leader of a community that follows him unquestioningly as the head of their order, their teacher, whom they worship and venerate, as he guides and instructs them all in the community. He is truly well known and famous, an illustrious, genuine spiritual leader whom many of his people consider saintly and holy. Being already very advanced in years, long have been the years since he has gone forth. Hence, many say he is nearing the end of his days, seeing that he is at the last phase of life. Hence, it would truly be wonderful if His Royal Majesty could go to visit him. For certainly in seeing him and paying homage at his feet, the heart would finally experience the genuine peace for which it is so desperately in need. However, again, on hearing this statement, King Ajātasattu remained quiet and did not say a word. Then another one of the royal ministers addressed King Ajātasattu by offering his own suggestion. Sire, how about Pakudha Kaccayana, who is the highly respected religious leader of a community that follows him unquestioningly as the head of their order, their teacher whom they worship and venerate, as he guides and instructs them all in the community? He is truly well known and famous, and illustrious, genuine. So it's the same refrain type of a thing. You see it with every teacher. Hence, it would truly be wonderful if His Royal Majesty could go to visit him. For certainly, it's in seeing him and paying homage at his feet, the heart would finally experience the genuine peace for which it is so desperately in need. But in hearing this statement as well, King Ajātasattu still remained quiet without saying a word. Then another one of the royal ministers addressed King Ajātasattu by offering his own suggestion. My Lord King, how about Sanjaya Belatthiputta, who is the highly respected religious leader of a community that follows him unquestioningly as the head of their order, their teacher whom they worship and venerate, as he guides and instructs them all in the community? By the way, Sanjaya was the teacher of both the chief disciples before they became Sariputta and Mahamoggallana, when they were Upatissa and Kolita. They were studying under him. And it was during that time when they said, well, this is not going anywhere. There's no progress. Because what he's teaching is basically nonsense. It was just rhetoric. It was just play on words. It was one of those irregular types that we covered in the Brahmajala Sutta. Because they were not getting anywhere. They knew that. Upatissa and Kolita, and that's when they decided to go each on their own. So they walked with the promise to each other that whoever finds the true Dhamma, they would come back to help the other one. And that's when Venerable, who became Sariputta, he saw Venerable Assaji, and Venerable Assaji told him the one portion of a verse that told him the Dhamma, basically. And Venerable Sariputta attained the first stage of awakening, and he said, "This is it. This is the path. I found it. I found it." And in his joy, he rushes to find his friend, Venerable Mahamukallana, Kolita, and he tells him the complete verse. And he also attains just by hearing it. That's the power of the Dhamma. Nowhere else do you find this. There's no belief. The Dhamma is the Dhamma is the Dhamma. It's beautiful in its beginning, beautiful in its middle, and beautiful in its end. It does not need our embellishing, our polishing efforts. It doesn't. It is complete, it is beautiful, it is sanditiko. And that is what happened to both of them. And guess what? Out of loyalty, they went back to Sanjaya, to their, now they know he's no longer going to be their teacher. But they tried to help him by saying, we're going to go to Samana Gautama. He will be our teacher. We know that. Come with us. He says, no, I'm good with these people, with these basically stupid people, the other students of theirs, because these were the only ones, the two, Kolita and Upatissa, who decided to walk away because they grew enough. They were like, we're at the same level. In fact, we have actually surpassed this person who we respect as our teacher, but he's not. So let's go all together. Let's go to the Buddha. We'll learn the Dhamma. That's why we've gone forth, haven't we? And Sanjaya says, no, you go, and I'll have these to continue mediocre, because he loved the community of students, to be surrounded by people who worship him. He didn't care about the Dhamma. But little did he know that Venerable Sariputta and Moggallana, when they went downstairs, they talked to the fellow students. Most of them left with the two chief disciples. They all became bhikkhus. Sanjaya was left behind. That Sanjaya is who's being referred to here. So, being already very advanced in years, long have been the years since he has gone forth. Hence, it would be truly wonderful if His Royal Majesty could go to visit him. For certainly, in seeing him and paying homage at his feet, the heart would finally experience the genuine peace for which it is so desperately in need. But in hearing this statement, King Ajātasattu again remained quiet without saying a word. He had already gone to every single one of them. Some of these ministers might not realize this or know it, maybe. They do know it, but yeah, why don't you give him another shot? Why don't you give that teacher another chance to help you, to impress you, to teach you something, to soothe your heart? He was not going to have that. They had their opportunity and they blew it. Then another one of the royal ministers addressed King Ajātasattu, the ruler of Magadha, by offering his own suggestion. Sire, there is the great Jain, Mahavira, Niganthanataputta, who is also the highly respected religious leader of a community that follows him unquestioningly as the head of their order. Their teacher, whom they worship and venerate as he guides and instructs them all in the community. He is truly well known and famous, an illustrious, genuine spiritual leader whom many of his people consider saintly and holy. Being already very advanced in years, long have been the years since he has gone forth. Many say he is nearing the end of his days, seeing that he is at the last phase of his life. Hence, it would truly be wonderful if His Royal Majesty could go to visit him. For certainly, in seeing him and paying homage at his feet, the heart would finally experience the genuine peace for which it is so desperately in need. However, in hearing this statement too, King Ajātasattu still remained quiet, without saying a word. So that is the list of philosophers or teachers that were known. The last one still is treated by the people, followers of Jain religion, as their Tirthankara, or their own Tathagata, their own, saint. You have millions of people following him still to this day, despite the very shady character that he had. In fact, many of the harm that came to the Sangha from outside were done by the Jains, by him instigating them. And anyhow, we'll go through that later. This is the second section. Kumara Bhachi Jivaka Katha. Speaking with Jivaka, Kumara Bhacha. Jivaka is the remember in the beginning it said as a sutta that Lord Buddha was staying along with the 1250 arahants in Jivaka's mango grove. Jivaka was also very highly well-known physician at court. He was a versatile physician, and he was also a noble disciple. He was already an upasaka, of course, but he was a noble disciple. And you can tell that King Ajātasattu was circling around the room trying to bring the attention to Jivaka. But if you notice, Jivaka did not say a word up until, well, let's go on and see when. Meanwhile, as this conversation was taking place, as all the other royal ministers were trying to advise the king on which teacher he should approach and venerate, Jivaka Kumara Bhacha was sitting there quietly among them, without saying a word. Then the king addressed Jivaka by saying, "My dear Jivaka, while everyone was speaking and making suggestions, why have you been silent all this time, brother?" At which point Jivaka replied by saying, "Sire, the Blessed One, the perfectly self-awakened Buddha, is himself here, near us, in Rajaga. For he is currently staying at my mango grove, along with a large group of Sangha, numbering more than 1,250 Bhikkhus. Moreover, sire, it is already a wide-known fact that the Blessed One indeed is an Arahant, the perfectly awakened one, endowed with sublime knowledge and supremely pure conduct, the well-gone, the knower of worlds, the incomparable, tamer of those to be tamed, the teacher of devas and humans, the enlightened and blessed. Therefore, I highly encourage your majesty to go and approach the Blessed One." By the way, did you notice that was the quality or the qualities of the Buddha that we pay tribute to when we say the words iti piso bhagava. That is what he just said in Pali. We read it in English, but what that means is, if you notice, there was no mention he is respected by the community unquestioningly. Did you see that? Oh, he's unchallenged in by the followers of his who treat him. No, these were just the qualities, and that says it all. You don't need much. The diamond doesn't need persuasion, to use a simile, to be a diamond. No money, however many accolades people give, it really is not going to change the sun in its brilliance. Same thing with the diamond, especially with the Buddha. For I do know for a fact that he is the only teacher, this is Jivaka still talking, at whose feet the heart will finally experience the genuine peace for which it is so desperately in need. That is pretty convincing. It's heartfelt. It's almost, one would say, a lion's roar. And whenever a noble disciple is saying those words, iti piso bhagava arahan samma sambuddha, which we just went over, that's essentially a lion's roar. That silences everyone in the room, in the court. And the king exclaimed, "Well then, my dear Jivaka, what are we waiting for? Have all the royal elephants be prepared, for we are going to see Master Gautama, your teacher. Yes, Lord, replied Jivaka as he gave the command, and 500 female elephants were made ready for their journey, as well as the royal bull elephant for the king to ride. Then he alerted the king by saying, Sire, all the elephants are ready and waiting for you at your convenience. Then King Ajātasattu arranged for his 500 women to mount those 500 female elephants, while he himself mounted the royal bull elephant. Then, with his accompanying royal ministers, his personal attendants and soldiers carrying lighted torches, they began their journey in full regalia, from the royal palace in Rajagaha to Jivaka's mango grove. As they began approaching the mango grove, hearing the silence all around him, the king began to worry. And soon the sense of uncertainty suddenly turned into terror. Stricken with fear, he began trembling with his hair standing on the back of his neck. Thus, feeling vulnerable and struck by fear in being out in the forest outside the gates at night, the king turned to Jivaka and said, My dear Jivaka, you are not playing a trick on me, are you? I hope this is not some kind of a ruse that you have schemed against me to set up a snare and then deliver me in chains to my enemies. For how could it be possible that this mango grove is currently occupied by a large group of Sangha that numbers more than 1,250 bhikkhus, if we cannot even hear a single cough, a sneeze, or even a soft whisper? There's hardly any noise at all. Do not be afraid, my lord. Do not worry, O great king. For I am not deceiving you, nor playing a trick or a ruse on you, nor am I to betray you by snaring and delivering you to your enemies. Far from it, sire. Have no fear, and just keep advancing as you are. Keep moving forward. There, up ahead, you can almost see the burning oil lamps lighting up the main circular hall, where you will find them all seated. It's a beautiful setting. You can see the darkness almost. You can hear probably the crickets, but no sound from any of the bhikkhus. There's so much, meanwhile, that's going on in that silence. That silence can help induce in us a sense of tranquility when we bring it to mind as we're sitting, by the way, in our own seclusion, being a recluse throughout the time that you're sitting in your own quote-unquote forest. So the king was terrified because he's always in fear. He knows people want to kill him. And he knew Jivaka was also a close friend of King Bimbisara, because they were both noble disciples. So in his mind, he's now looking at everyone as a potential enemy out to kill him, especially if it happens to be a friend of his late father. But he's run out of options. He's in pain. He will go anywhere, and that's the one place he had not gone to, the presence of Lord Buddha. And he knew the way to do that would be through Jivaka. So this is the third section, Sāmaññaphala Sutta, asking about the fruits of recluseship. Having already gone as far as possible by riding his royal elephant, King Ajātasattu descended and started to make his way towards the monastery by foot, with Jivaka walking right by his side. Then the king asked Jivaka, "But, my dear Jivaka, where will the Blessed One be seated? How would I recognize the Blessed One amidst all the other bhikkhus?" Right there, sire. That is the Blessed One, seated in the middle with his back against the central pillar, facing the eastern direction, in front of the Bhikkhu Sangha. We often think that the Buddha will have the look that we traditionally have been used to seeing him as or in. The knotted hair, or sitting in the center at the very least, right? The forefront of all the Sangha and everybody behind him, almost like being on stage. But in all reality, it was anything but. The bhikkhus were very respectful, of course, of the Buddha, and where it's the most venerated position to be. But oftentimes, the bhikkhus would show up, they would sit, and another bhikkhu, other groups of bhikkhus would come, and they would sit down wherever was available. And Lord Buddha, being a bhikkhu, he himself would sit anywhere he would find a spot. And he would have his hair shaven. He's a bhikkhu. He didn't have a situation where the rules did not apply to him. No. He also shaved his head and beard. So when you're a stranger or somebody who has not seen him, remember, he was the enemy of Ajātasattu in absentia through Devaddata. So Devaddata had placed all these poisonous ideas in his mind. So he never dared. He was intimidated by the Buddha, but he had never seen him. And he's seeing now 1,251 bhikkhus sitting there, but he didn't know which one is Buddha. They're all in robes. Until Jivaka said, right there by the central pillar, in the direction of the east, sitting there, that's the Buddha. Then, comforted by these words from Jivaka, King Ajātasattu went and approached the Blessed One. As he did so, he paused and stood to one side, while looking at all of the bhikkhus sitting around him, surveying the company of bhikkhus who were seated in total silence, unmoving and still, just like the silence pervading the surface of an undisturbed, placid lake. Can you imagine a place where there are even 10 people sitting there quietly, let alone 1,250 quiet? Then, with delight surging through him, the king could not help but make a heartfelt utterance while exclaiming, "Ah, may one day my own son, Prince Udayibhadda, also be able to enjoy such peace as this noble Bhikkhu Sangha now clearly is enjoying." Remember Udayibhadda? He will kill his father. Ajātasattu is going to be killed at the hands of his own son, about whom he's making that wish. It was at that instant that the Blessed One addressed King Ajātasattu by asking, "Great King, I see your heart move, pulling you in the direction of the one you love." "Indeed, Bhante, I adore and love my son, the young Prince Udayibhadda. May he gain the necessary blessings to one day also be sitting in such peaceful and silent serenity, enjoying the same calm just like these venerable sirs of the Bhikkhu Sangha are currently experiencing." Then King Ajātasattu paid homage by venerating the Blessed One, and then to the Bhikkhu Sangha, with his hands in front of his heart in respectful anjali. Afterwards, he sat to one side and began addressing the Blessed One by saying, "Bhante, There is a question that we would like to ask the Blessed One regarding a certain matter. We have come in the hopes that the Blessed One would indulge us our request by providing an answer for it, helping to clarify this issue for us by explaining its meanings. And the Blessed One replied by saying, "Great King, ask whatever question that is in your heart, for which you have come seeking the answer." Then King Ajātasattu proceeded by asking his question. "Bhante, there are many kinds of professions and crafts requiring specific skill sets, which one must train in, apprentice, and dedicatedly home in and perfect until mastery is reached. Skills and such crafts as elephant riders, cavalry, charioteers, archers, standard bearers, camp marshals, supply chain soldiers, dignified royal princes, special forces, shield-bearing soldiers, infantry, and slave soldiers. Also, professions that require years of practice and expertise, such as bread makers and bakers, chefs and cooks, carpenters and stonemasons, builders and jewelers, carvers, painters, bead and garland makers, fabric dyers, embroiders, basket weavers, potters, accountants and mathematicians, laundrymen, as well as all other crafts for which a specific set of abilities is required. Now, aside from their obvious required skills and specific attributes that one must first possess in order to become a master at them, each of these crafts and professions also brings with it its own set of outcomes that are its unique and inevitable fruits, whereby one sees here and now, in this very life, the resultant benefits that the very merits of having engaged and practiced these respective professions and their skill sets bring. Thus, having gained the fruits of their labor, that is, the outcome of one's dedicated efforts, individuals engaging in these various crafts and professions come to enjoy a life that is both happy and fulfilling, becoming self-reliant and supremely confident in whatever profession or craft they happen to be a master of or a skilled apprentice. In this way, they are able to support their parents, their wives and children, their friends and relatives, whereby many people, in addition to themselves, reap the positive effects of their efforts and professional prowess. Having thus gained so many advantages in life because of the fruits of their professional skills, these individuals then open-handedly provide generous gifts to all recluses, religious practitioners, and Brahmins. So now he's bringing the attention to the recluse, the spiritual practitioner, the religious person, if you will, in modern parlance. To this end, they secure for themselves a healthy store of merits that lead to a rebirth into the delightful heavenly realms, where they continue to reap the benefits and fruits of their efforts and actions, this time within the divine spheres of existence. Therefore, Bhante, my question deals with the issue of the fruits that are to be gained from living the life of a recluse. Thus, compared to the fruit of the labor a householder gains from the trade or profession one engages in, thereby earning one's own livelihood, what are the fruits of the labor of a recluse who strives in living the holy life? So all that effort, what's the outcome? Bhante, could you please help me understand by clarifying as to what might be those directly visible fruits and outcomes gained from recluseship, those specific advantageous and uniquely beneficial outcomes that are observable right here and now in this very life, being the direct results of truly living the life of a recluse? Very pragmatic, very to the point, as they say. And the Blessed One responded by first asking this question. Great King, do you recall ever having asked this question while addressing other teachers, recluses or Brahmins, before asking it here again today? Before I answer, let's hear what other teachers have said in their responses to this same question. Yes, Bhante, I do recall having asked this question previously, before asking it here of the Blessed One today. And if it is not an inconvenience to you, great king, could you please reiterate as to what their individual replies were to your specific question? There are types of questions or that have to be answered, the Buddha says, with a question first. This is one of them. This is a classic that the Buddha uses sometimes to tease out more from the questioner, because the answer has everything to do with what has already happened in this case, because it builds on that. Whatever the Buddha is going to say, it builds on the disappointing replies that the king had received, which got him to come now in the middle of the night outside the city gates, which now the gates are closed, by the way. This is outside of the palace gates, the main city of Rajaga, outside the walls. That's why the king was terrified, by the way. He's not supposed to be outside at night. But because it's a full moon night, this and that, and he has no other choice, he can't sleep. So anyhow, the Buddha just asked him, could he reiterate as to what their replies were? And he says, surely, Bhante, it is not an inconvenience at all, especially when it is the Blessed One himself who is the one asking the question of us, in whose presence we are fortunate enough to be sitting in person. Well, in that case, great king, speak as you please. So here we start with Puranaka Vada, Puranakasapa's philosophy, what he teaches. I remember, Bhante, this one time when I approached Puranakasapa, where after exchanging friendly and courteous greetings with him, I sat down and proceeded to ask him the very same question, and in the same manner, with which I just now asked here, namely, whether it was possible for him to point out or indicate to us the directly visible fruits that are to be undeniably gained from recluseship by living and practicing the life of a recluse. However, when I finished asking him my question, Puranakasapa answered by saying, Great King, whether someone commits an action or instigates others to commit an action or behave in a certain way, such as by hurting, torturing, decapitating, and mutilating, inflicting pain and suffering unto another, oppressing, harassing, and intimidating others, whether by doing so himself or influencing others to do so, there would ultimately not be any evil committed, really by either oneself or the one who was instigated to do those acts. Similarly, if one himself kills or causes and influences others to kill living beings by destroying life, stealing and breaking into others' homes, or taking what is not freely given to oneself, plundering the wealth of others by committing burglary, or trapping and robbing travelers on their journeys, seducing those who belong to others by engaging in wrong sexual behavior and committing adultery, speaking falsehood and telling lies, whether one is doing all such acts by oneself or instigates others to do so, there truly is no evil committed in any of these situations. Imagine that. In fact, great king, if one were to strike down all the living populations in the entire world by slicing through with a massive circular razor-sharp spinning blade, talk about the person's strange, creative use of imagery, tells you something about what's going on in their mind. And this is supposedly the leader, a religious leader of many, many people, talking about killing. Anyhow, killing each and every one of those beings, still no harm or evil would be taking place. Hence, there would not be any issue, and most certainly there would not be any consequences at all from all that destruction. And similarly, if one were to go to the southern bank of the river Ganges and start killing or instigating and encouraging others to do the same by killing, hurting, torturing, decapitating, etc., it's, he's repeating that, there would ultimately not be any evil committed. And in just the same manner, if one were to go to the northern bank of the river Ganges and instead start giving gifts or make generous offerings or encourage others to do the same by making offerings as well, again, there would be no such thing as merits being accrued or the semblance of some fruits or outcomes of merit being produced as a consequence to those actions. So whether the person is killing or donating, there's no outcome, he says. There's no consequence at all. So whether it is giving generously, maintaining discipline, self-control, or any kind of restraint, as well as speaking frankly by using honest and truthful speech, there absolutely is no merit or outcome of merit to look forward to, as some consequence or fruit to be gained by the one committing it. This, therefore, Bhante, was the answer I received from Purana Kassapa to my question, which was simply asking whether there could be any directly visible fruits that are undeniably gained from recluseship through living and practicing the life of a recluse. And, to my dismay, he instead went on to describe his own doctrine and philosophy of inaction, while pointing out the inefficacy and uselessness of action in producing any fruit or consequence. Bhante, it was just as if someone was asked a straightforward question, say about a mango, but instead the other replied by speaking about breadfruit, leaving out the mango entirely. Or when asked about a breadfruit, the one replying started talking about a mango. In just the same way, Bhante, in asking Purana Kassapa my question about any directly visible fruits or outcomes to living the life of a recluse, he turned and instead started babbling about his idiotic doctrine of fruitlessness and ineffective nature of all actions. It was then, Bhante, that I began to reflect by saying to myself, how in the world could I argue or make fun of someone claiming to be a recluse, residing here in this land, while being supported and benefiting enormously from living in my kingdom? That was, Bhante, my unpleasant and strange encounter with Purana Kassapa, whose ideas about reality did not help me with my question. Hence, I had nothing to say in agreement to what he proclaimed, nor anything to disagree with, as I realized it was pointless discussing anything further with such a fool. So I arose from my seat and departed, for there was nothing more for us to discuss. We have that thinking today, where people say there's no such thing as karma. We have different names for those philosophies or ideas. Oh, the good deed you're doing is not going to benefit. Well, obviously it's benefiting him. Purana Kassapa, he's living on the land given to him by the king. King Ajātasattu is definitely keeping this guy alive. He's given him parks, places for his residence, support, and they were all protected, by the way. All these religious figures were protected by the king. There were always these special decrees. So he's obviously benefiting from the choice that he made to go forth and be a recluse, even though he's coming around and saying, well, there's no benefit at all. Well, the king is being generous, providing him with food, place to live, robes, gifts. This is just insanity, because people are in love with their thoughts and ideas. Remember, you see this also in the Brahmajala Sutta, which we covered for several weeks, where the Buddha was talking about those who teach inaction. Lord Buddha did not mention names. One of the reasons why I wanted to cover this sutta not much later than now, without that big of a gap between the Brahmajala and this, is because our memories are still fresh, somewhat to what was discussed in the Brahmajala Sutta, the 62 views. So here we see at least one of those views, erroneous views that lead a person to more and more suffering. Both that so-called teacher is suffering, his followers are suffering, and the king who went there to seek a remedy ended up still suffering, walked away suffering. Now let's go to the second one that was mentioned earlier in the sutta today. So all of these, by the way, have shown up, but without names being attached to them in the Brahmajala Sutta. Now we are seeing who these advocates of these wrong views are, the major figures, the players, the big players in Indian thought. Who, by the way, today we have them under different characters, under different titles, but essentially they're part and parcel of the 62 views. Next, we get to Makkhali Gosala Vada, Makkhali Gosala's philosophy. Then, on another occasion, I went and approached Makkhali Gosala. And after the friendly exchange of greetings, I sat down and again asked him the very same question, and in the same manner as I did here, namely, whether it was possible for him to point out or indicate to us the directly visible fruits that are to be undeniably gained from recluseship by living and practicing the life of a recluse. However, when I finished asking my question, Makkhali Gosala started saying, "Great King, there is absolutely no reason or a cause that is responsible for defiling or corrupting the hearts of beings. Hence, beings are corrupted and defiled without there being any cause or reason for it. Similarly, there are no reasons or causes for the purification of beings either, for they are purified and uncorrupted without there being any causes or reasons for it. Furthermore, there is no such thing as self-determined or intentional behavior, nor one that is influenced by another, whether in one's thinking or behavior. There is no such thing as manly effort, personal fortitude, determination, or some type of human willpower at all. There are some books that are being written today. I've seen a few of them, just the cover, and they are advocating the same thing. I wonder who was their inspiration. This idiot, Makkhali Gosala, probably. Where I read one cover, I couldn't even finish seeing more subtitles of all that, the subheading rather, where there is no such thing as determination. There is no such thing as will. There's no such thing as intentional thinking. How did they end up writing that book? Or a single letter? How did they hit the keyboard? It's so idiotic. But people are in love with their ideas, despite the fact that their ideas make no sense, have nothing to do with reality, with the facts. It's like those people who say we live off of air. We don't eat anything. We don't consume anything, just air. Even a bird has to come down and eat something, or eat something in midair. Thus, all living beings are hopelessly existing, without any ability to act or change their circumstances, lacking in determination, whether self-generated or instigated by others. They are all helpless, powerless, and empty of energy. All that they are and everything that they do is really living according to their predestined path, facing and undergoing whatever their existences present to them, irrespective of them, completely driven by what is already decided and destined, experiencing both pain and pleasure according to the dictates of their rebirths into the 6 planes of existence. After all, there are 1,406,600 wombs total for beings to gain rebirth through. There are 553 types of kammas, including both full and half-full kammas. There are 62 various paths of practice, 62 minor eons, and 62 categories of beings. With the, excuse me, with the human being having 8 separate stages in one's life. In addition, there are 4,900 Ajivaka ascetics, 4,900 wandering homeless ascetics and recluses, and 4,900 domains where Nagas reside and call their home. There are 2,000 faculties and 3,000 kinds of hells and 36 states of nebulae in the space. Furthermore, there are 7 kinds of percipient embryos and 7 non-percipient embryos, 7 kinds of plant growth, 7 kinds of devas, 7 kinds of human beings, 7 kinds of demonic beings, 7 great lakes, 7 types of wind that move 700 streams, 7 cliffs and mountaintops, with 700 deep valleys, 7 kinds of dreams with 700 ways of interpreting them, 8,400,000 great eons. All these are way stations that living beings, whether foolish or wise, all must undergo and experience prior to putting an end to suffering. So, in the face of all these facts, there is not the option nor the possibility for anyone to declare to oneself, with this virtuous behavior or by undertaking this training, rule of self-disciplining myself, while practicing with diligence and fervency, I will bring about the fruition of unripened kammic results and obliterate the fruits of whatever ripened kamma come to the surface and manifest in my life, or at least make them occur in small doses by minimizing or reducing their devastating impact. No, such a state of affairs is simply an impossibility. Therefore, whatever pleasure or pain that one may experience in life is already decided. Nothing more and nothing less. It is destined. Similarly, with the rounds that one has to go through in his rebirths, where there are a certain number of cycles of rebirth that one has to make it through, no more and no less, without the possibility of being shortened or extended in any way. No chance of improving one's state of being, nor in fact to worsen it either. It's all decided already. So it is very much like a ball of string that one tosses. It will come to a full stop once it is no longer rolling and unwinding, as the string reaches its maximum length. In the same way, whether foolish or wise, all living beings must undergo and experience all that is allotted to them as they wander through samsara, until they finally experience the end of suffering, and not a moment sooner or later, for it is all decided and cannot be altered. Thanks for your patience in having me read that. Here, therefore, Bhante, was the other reply to my question which I received, this time from Makkali Gosala, as I inquired whether there could be any directly visible fruits that are undeniably gained from recluseship by living and practicing the life of a recluse. And to my surprise and dismay, he instead went on to describe his own doctrine of purification that supposedly occurs naturally on its own, as a result of moving through the cycles of rebirth. Bhante, it was just as if someone was asked a straightforward question, say about a mango, but instead the other replied by speaking about the breadfruit, leaving out the mango entirely. So he's using the same simile in a sense to point out, because remember, he's probably looking and seeing mango hanging from the trees because the Buddha and the Bhikkhus are sitting in the mango grove of Jivaka. And in India, the mangoes are pretty huge. So probably that's why he's using that simile. I don't know. In just the same way, Bhante, in asking Makkali Gosala my question about any directly visible fruits or outcomes to living the life of a recluse, he turned and instead started babbling about his idiotic doctrine of purification that supposedly occurs naturally on its own, as a result of moving through the cycles of rebirth. It was then that, Bhante, I began to reflect by saying to myself, how in the world could I argue or make fun of someone claiming to be a recluse, residing here in this land, while being supported and benefited benefiting enormously from living in my kingdom. And that, Bhante, was my rather unpleasant and strange encounter with Makkali Gosala, whose ideas about reality did not help me at all with my question. Hence, I had nothing to say in agreement to what he proclaimed, nor anything to disagree with, as I realized it was pointless to discuss anything further with such a fool. So I rose from my seat and departed, for there was nothing more for us to discuss. You know, there's that saying, it is written. It is written. I grew up hearing that in Lebanon, in the Middle East, in books later on, in famous novels or fictional novels like The Alchemist. You hear that, you read that a lot with Paulo Coelho. Oh, and he says, it is written, it is written. In Arabic, it's called maktub. Maktub means it's the past participle of to write. Kataba. Maktub means it is written. It also means basically a letter. You have hope with a letter, but when it's written, you're done because it's written on your forehead. That's what the teaching is. Basically, the person is stuck. So some God has written it for you, and you are gonna have to go through that. Even getting on a plane with an actual designated seat, you have a chance at least that the flight attendants can have pity on you when you're sitting in an uncomfortable seat or next to a very disturbing character, and they'll come and say, okay, let's switch your seat. But when it's written, you have no say in it, isn't it? There's no chance. And here we have Makkali Gosala, who was a big proponent of that. Years ago, before I came to the Dhamma, I was exploring and I came across some Raja Yoga, traditions and Kriya Yoga, Raja Yoga, etc. And in one gathering I was there, one of the teachers got up and said, there's a certain number of breathing techniques that you have to do. And once it reaches a certain number, which is like 1,000,000, then you naturally will become an enlightened person. Moksha. I was like, that's convenient. That's it. That's it. So you just do what we're telling you, and naturally you will become enlightened. Now, we have millions of people who believe this nonsense in the world, not just now, throughout human history. We can laugh about it, but you have billions of people today believing in, oh, it's written, people are sacrificing their health, their humanity, their integrity, dignity, by killing others, destroying others, because they have a belief that, oh, it is written in our book that we are the special people, that we are by nature, because of who we are entitled to this or for this. So everybody has to bow down to us, type of a thing. Not just one people, by the way. I've seen it across the board in different cultures. This is insanity. But it's lucrative insanity, because for the time being, the person is living without faith in anything other than the six senses, especially the 5 sensual experiences she's having. They're very happy with that. They're milking their power and their status as much as possible, because deep down they have no faith that there will be consequences to their actions. They think of human being essentially as being just a robot, programmable robots, machines. That's what modern day so-called philosophers, idiots, say. But you have even more, millions of other idiots who believe that. That's why the Dhamma today is more valuable than air, one would say, because humanity has become so corrupted. Even the Dhamma is corrupted. in many ways that it's being presented in the world and has been presented for the past 60, 70 years in the world, in the West. So we have to really be heedful with our own beliefs, our own justifications of our actions. Am I following this notion that, oh, it's written anyhow, it's not going to make a difference because, yeah, I was born to this parent or this couple, my mom and dad, so they raised me like this, or my community or my upbringing was very difficult, or I was dealt with some terrible cards and I ended up in this mess. So this is it until the end of my life. Let me just, bear it and then be dead. And hopefully next life I'm going to be. No, that's not Dhamma. That has nothing to do with the teachings of the Buddha. That's beyond complacency, inertia. No, you have a lot that you can control. A lot. That's why we insist on starting with Sila. Start with your smile, with your attitude towards yourself while you're sitting to meditate. Drop your expectations once in a while at least. Give something to someone. Don't worry, it will come back to you. The air you breathe, you didn't pay for that. But it comes. The morning when you wake up, the sun, the warmth of the sun that you get, the oxygen you get, the ability to move your body, your joints, you didn't pay for that, but you have it. So there's so much you can already do. You're getting out of bed. That's a big accomplishment for many people. So not minimizing these factors in our life is a huge step forward. So definitely there is a moving forward. Remember, Jivaka said to the king, don't worry, king. Keep moving forward. There was a symbolic, powerful statement there for Jivaka to be saying that to the king, to us. Ajita Kesa Kambala Vada. Ajita Kesa Kambali's philosophy. On another occasion, Bhante, I went and approached Ajita Kesa Kambali. There too, after, by the way, Kesa Kambali means human hair. So he had, there was a tradition, probably there still is, or are traditions in India, where they would collect human hair and they would weave it together and make a robe. And Lord Buddha mocks these in several places in the suttas because he says these things neither give warmth when it's cold outside, nor keep you cool in the heat of summer. Plus, they stink. They're not designed to be worn. But that's the whole point for these people. Anything to make you stand out. Anything in a large group of people. And, if you ever get a chance to go to India or places like that, people want, in these crowds, yogis, sadhus, and things like that, one person you will see with the hand up, another person wearing the same, hair, never showering, as if it will give them something spiritual, some benefit. But the idiots would flock around them, just like a group of flies will go around cow dung. So anyhow, Kesa Kambali. There too, after exchanging friendly greetings with him, I sat down and then asked him the very same question, and in the same manner as I did here, namely, whether it was possible for him to point out or indicate to us the directly visible fruits that are to be undeniably gained from recluseship by living and practicing the life of a recluse. However, when I finished asking my question, Ajita Kesa Kambali started saying, Great King, there is absolutely no such thing as an action of giving or making an offering, really. No meaning to the giving of gifts or in being open-handed with generosity towards others. There are no results and no fruits to be had or gained as consequence to certain behavior over others, such as in doing good or evil actions. No results whatsoever. Also, there is no such thing as this world versus that world beyond, because there is no afterlife. So modern day reductionist believers, or even atheists, some, they fit into this bill, into this category, where one has to face the after effects of the actions they committed in the past. So there's no afterlife. There's nothing special about parents either. Hence, there really is no mother or father, for in truth, no one really takes birth. The disturbing fact is that I've seen over the course of the last 20 years of my life on this planet, children addressing their parents by their first name. This is terrible. I've seen this throughout different parts of the world. They don't say mother. They don't say father. They call them, their first name. And when I look at the parent, when I ask them, like, why this? Oh, I just give them their freedom. I just give them their, craziness. This is stupidity. This is foolishness. Because you are chipping away at the very role of a parent. Even something that might seem to be superficial, just a name. No, it's more than a name. More than a name. Ask any orphan or a stepchild where one's parent goes and marries someone, or they're included into a family, and now there is a new caretaker, how difficult it is for that orphan or adopted child to really lock on that person and really give them the title of a father or a mother. It takes a lot. It's heavy. But it's also delicious when it is deserved. But it has to come from the parent, the caretaker, doing their part in making sure that they deserve it. And one of the key factors first to be placed there is discipline. Boundaries have to be respected. So you have this boundary eraser in society. Social networks is a perfect example. TV shows that people were exposed to for decades, where the parents were losing their roles. And the kid, who has nothing to do with that culture, that setting, was now bringing that mindset into the family. And the parents were allowing it. And they are still allowing it to the point where they no longer deserve the title of a parent because they never behave like a parent. A parent is not somebody who simply provides food or shelter. That's not all. So the child has to know the difference between you and a friend and a peer. No, you're a parent. You are a parent. Lord Buddha says they are Brahma in the suttas. Lord Buddha calls the mother and father Brahma, equivalent to God, to be treated with such respect. Because you were in diapers. You needed food. You had no shelter. You could have been left outside. You hear this. When I lived in the US, I would, almost every week, you would hear a mother or some parent had deposited the child in a trash bin. They heard some noise coming out from a garbage can somewhere. And they go in and they see a baby there. Your parents did not do that. So here we have the audacity of another stupid, foolish person who is commanding authority over others, changing people's quality of being and humanity, causing them to go into darkness and delusion, and causing themselves, as well as others, a long, long journey, life in the hells. Let's go back to the Kesa Kambali. All you need to know is that a person is basically made up of the four primaries, and when the time comes and the body has broken down and dies, The fundamental constituent of earth in his body goes back to and merges with the external earth elements surrounding his body. Similarly, the fundamental constituent of water in his body goes back to and merges with the external water elements surrounding his body. Further, the fundamental constituent of fire in his body goes back to and merges with the external fire element surrounding his body. And lastly, the fundamental constituent of air in his body goes back to and merges with the external air element surrounding his body. Thus, his faculties all get dispersed and join with the surrounding space. Then, 4 men come and carry his body to the funeral pyre, leaving behind them the set of continuous footprints that stretch all the way to the cremation ground. Once the bones have turned bleached white in the blazing fires, and then to gray ash, in that pile of dust is where all his actions and offerings to gods will end up and remain. For there is nowhere else for them to go or take one freely. This is what we have in the world today. When you mention spirituality, people mock you. When you talk about the holy life, they mock you. People think there's something wrong when you're dedicated to a practice, to a path of practice that transforms you, purifies you. They don't know how to wrap their minds around that. But that's where you need to stop. Take inventory of your mind, of asking yourself the before and after question. Was I in as much turmoil? Am I in as much turmoil as I was in the past, given similar circumstances? How about my choices and decisions I'm making vis-a-vis these circumstances, these situations, these factors in my life? Am I losing it? Am I losing control? Am I saying, doing, thinking things that I used to then? Same or some change? And what type of a change? Is it worse or better? If it is better, it's working. You need to keep digging. You have to go deeper then. And if it's not, walk away from that. Something's wrong. Either your approach is different, or you need therefore clarification, or the whole teaching is wrong. There is wrong view. Wrong view comes from having Yoniso Manasikara, placing the attention at the matrix, at the actual core of the place where the contact is taking place. The most important part, radical attention. Not telling yourself bogus stories. Being present with the facts, not lying, not sugarcoating anything. And the other, very important, hearing the voice of another. Now that is very important. What kind of a voice? Who is this person? For us, it's the Buddha. Why? Because what he said makes sense. Not just sense, but it delivers. There's not a portion of the Dhamma where you have to sugarcoat it for it to be palatable. Nothing that I've discovered over the last 40 years almost. Nothing. It's all there. It's delicious. But I have to first clean my windshield, my eyes, and then approach it with wise attention, radical attention, yoniso manasikara. And then I was, oh yes. Who cares what's happening around you though? Ultimately, because you need to first get an understanding. And through your transformation, the world is changing indefinitely. Indefinitely, honestly. So this whole thing that people keep talking about, this is Kesa Kambali still. They keep talking about claiming that there is an afterlife and that one must be careful with one's life and do what is good, for there are results and fruits to one's actions, is just the doctrine of idiots. And anyone who repeats it or tries to convince others of it is passing on the same idiotic views that are just nonsense and not much else. That is because once the body breaks down and dies, it really does not matter whether one has one was wise or a block-headed fool, since they will both be annihilated, fully destroyed and obliterated. For no one ever goes on existing after death, in any form or shape, anywhere at all. That's because there is absolutely nothing after death. We have a lot of that thinking in the world. Unfortunately, it's no longer taking place in fancy university auditoriums or in some philosophical, I don't know, platforms or panels. It's on the street. It's with kids playing with social media, things like that. I remember about 7, 8 years ago, a student asked me of this very troublesome phenomenon called TikTok, an app that was influencing his small community. The girls were behaving, young girls were moving and dancing in ways that were very inappropriate. Young girls, like 5, 6 years old. I've never seen what he was talking about, but what he was saying, how he was saying, I was like, wow. And then over my encounter, different parts of the world, I was like, wow, this is a big, terrible phenomenon. But it's not just one thing. It's everywhere. So even youngsters, kids, are growing up without any hiri and ottappa. There is no sense of inner wise shame developing in them. There's no wise inner fear or dread. If I do this, there will be that outcome. I can't do that. This push for individuality, individual freedoms, this and that, and identification. I identify like this. You have to respect me. People are becoming not unified, in fact, but broken into pieces. When people buy jigsaw puzzles and put them together, think of this as the opposite of that. Being dispersed, demolished. And they start now, unfortunately, no longer with university teachers, professors, graduate students, but even children are demonstrating this in their behavior, which is not good news for us as a species, as a world. So there again, Bhante, as you see, was yet another reply I received, this time from Ajātasattu, while trying to find out as to whether there could be any directly visible fruits that are undeniably gained from recluseship by living and practicing the life of a recluse. And to my dismay, he instead went on to describe his own doctrine of total annihilation that occurs at one's death. Bhante, it was just as if someone was asked a straightforward question, say about a mango, but instead the other replied by speaking about breadfruit, leaving out the mango entirely. Or when asked about a breadfruit, the one replying started talking about a mango. In just the same way, Bhante, in asking Ajātasattu my question about any directly visible fruits or outcomes to living the life of a recluse, he turned and instead started babbling about his idiotic doctrine of total annihilation that occurs at one's death. So this one was basically, if you recall, the 44 views and the previous, the 16, so 18, yeah, so 62 view total. This went into the afterlife, so the elimination. That I'm referring to the Brahmajala Sutta. Out of the 62 views, we saw them as the eternalists and those that are the nihilists. So here Kesakambali is one of those. It was then, Bhante, that I began to reflect by saying to myself, how in the world could I argue or make fun of someone claiming to be a recluse, residing here in this land, while being supported and benefiting enormously from living in my kingdom? And that, Bhante, was my rather unpleasant and strange encounter with Ajita Kesakambali, whose ideas about reality did not help me at all with my question. Hence, I had nothing to say in agreement to what he proclaimed, nor anything to disagree with, as I realized it was pointless to discuss anything further with such a fool. So I arose from my seat and departed, for there was nothing more for us to discuss. We'll stop here. Lord Buddha advises us to engage in a conversation with individuals who deserve to be conversing with. Not everyone deserves to converse with. We have to understand that. They don't dictate that. The person, simply because they ask us a question, does not mean they deserve an answer. There's many factors that go into play. It's very contextual. You have to understand that the person making up a comment or a question, coming to you with that, they have some responsibilities to bear, along with the idea. First of all, is it a question that deserves an answer? Second, how are they asking? Third, what is the intention behind it? You can tell a lot from their behavior, from the setup of the question, and also from the reputation of the person asking the question. They might have asked you before many, many times, and it went nowhere. Now, that's a person you do not engage in a conversation with, because they don't deserve it, because they never, it's just a curiosity or just trying to be argumentative. Time is short, so you don't want to sit there and just deal with nonsense. But apparently, King Ajātasattu was somewhat, despite the fact that he was a person who, committed patricide, killing his own father, but he was nevertheless pragmatic. He was not an idiot. He was able to understand, how to distinguish something that's a falsehood from that which is not, at least now, post Devaddata. By the way, he was also a supporter of Devaddata when Devaddata did break the Sangha and went and established his own community of monks, even nuns. So Ajātasattu kept supporting Devaddata until a moment came where he had nobody left, because he wasn't speaking Dhamma. He had nothing to share to the community and with the community. And then that's when Devaddata went and tried to apologize, but he never made it to the Buddha, because the gravity of his evil was so intense that he died on the way. So this is happening later than that. So there was a lot of guilt in Ajātasattu that I supported your enemy. And I've heard all these stories about you, these insightful things, and people I respect, Jivaka being one of them. We call him a brother, right? So it's like, but there's a lot of fighting going on within Ajātasattu. And it's funny how, ironic, not funny, how he was saying about his own son. He loves his son. He adores his son. Meanwhile, he killed his own father. He himself had killed his own father, who loved him, perhaps more than he, Ajātasattu, loves his son, Udaibhadda. So I hope this is allowing you to flesh out and to get a more three-dimensional support to the Dhamma that is going to come through, because we haven't yet heard the Buddha speak, in a sense, right? So the Buddha, next week, we'll see how he starts talking about the three trainings, as he's done with the Brahmajala, Puttapada, for example. So he starts with Sila and then the three trainings, right? And then he goes into Samadhi, and then he goes into the Pañña portion, wisdom. So virtue, mental cultivation, and discernment, wisdom. So I'll stop here and see if there are any questions, comments. guess not today. All right, so let us transfer some merit. Akasatha chabumata deva nagamahidika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu lokasasanam. Akasatha chabumata deva nagamahidika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu desanam. Akasatha chabumata deva nagamahidika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu mam paranti. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. May your hearts be at peace. Remember, the body is important. Buddha says, Piti manasa kayang pasambati. When there's that spiritual joy in the mind, the body experiences this gladdening relaxation. Pasadhakayo sukhang vediyati. When there's that tranquility in the body taking place, and suddenly there's this soothing, blissful experience throughout the body that one feels, the feeling of this wonderful sensation of vibrating, peaceful, blissful, pleasant feeling. So the mind experiencing joy inevitably affects the body. Piti manasa kayang pasambati, pasadha kayo sukhang vediyati, sukhino chittang samadhiyati. When there is, at that point, when the heart is in that state of happiness, the mind becomes collected. Sukhino chittang samadhiyati, the mind suddenly drops into this stability, the collected stability of mind, what we call samadhi. Samahite chitte dhamma patu bhavo. When the heart is in such samadhi, in such collectedness, stability, the Dhamma appears, arises, insights. Samahite chitte yata bhutang pajanati. And as the heart is deepening in its stability, in its quietude, without you doing anything, by the way, suddenly you start seeing how things come to be. Firstly, in your mind, your tendencies, your anusayas, your hidden tendencies, things that are troublesome, or things that you try to remove or fight against, suppress, painful things. You start seeing connection, and then you start seeing not just the connection, but you start seeing the dependent origination, causation factor. You see what is happening before, you see what's caused. This is being caused by, and by the same token, this is leading the way to what type of experience. And you see that taking place. And you see by cutting this out, that which will be happening in the future, that is stopped in the future, as in the next millisecond. So you see how much power you have. Not just power, but power of the wisdom that is inculcated, that is taught in this Dhamma and discipline. And no one else is involved. It's you and your radical attention and your wisdom. Wise way of maintaining attention. So where you put the attention is key, ultimately. That's power. Your attention in your behavior, whether it's your mental behavior, thoughts, what you allow playing in your mind, your communication, your speech, power over that, exercising the speech that is both audible, but even more so the one that is still behind your teeth. You haven't spoken them out yet. And then the physical action. And one of the best ways and quickest ways that the Buddha teaches us is through the practice of being generous, open-handed. Start with being open-handed with yourself. Give yourself something every day. Something small, something not expensive. It could be monetarily valuable, but it doesn't have to be. And then do so with others. So may you be happy, healthy, practicing, and discovering newness every moment through the Dhamma. May the Triple Gems blessings be with you. Until next time. Sukhi Hotu.